Make your guest list your dream client list, the best legal excuse on earth to get 45-minute conversations with someone that you'd never get on a sales call.
Do you have any examples of that actually working out?
Lauren Harris, co-founder of Reliable PR and Marketing. Her belief is that if your business isn't growing, it's not a marketing problem, it's a strategy problem.
Every episode has to reinforce something that you actually stand for. It has to have a next step that the listener can take besides subscribe. Episodes that only exist on Spotify don't compound. Pull up your last 10 episodes and ask yourself 3 questions. 1,
Lauren, as a marketer, number one reason most podcasts aren't actually helping in their business. What do you think?
I think what I've seen with the companies that we've worked with Reliable PR is that the number one thing is that most podcasts aren't connected to anything. So they were started because someone said, like, you should have a podcast. And nobody ever really decided what the podcast is actually supposed to do for the business. Is it lead generation, positioning, relationship building with potential partners, credibility for the sales team? And the problem is they're all completely different shows with completely different formats and completely different guest strategies depending on the answer to that question. So when you don't decide up front what the plan is, you end up with a beautiful podcast that lives in a corner of the internet. It doesn't get a ton of downloads and it never moves a dollar. So it's not the podcast problem, it's the strategy behind what the podcast is for. Same as, most marketing problems.
Okay. So it's the fact that they don't have anything connected to the podcast. There's no strategy behind the podcast that actually will help push the business forward.
Yeah.
Do you have any examples of that actually working out, like someone actually genuinely having a strategy behind the podcast?
Yeah, we had a client who the goal of the podcast was lead generation, of course. So what he did was he brought on guests who were speaking to the target audience. So the people who were brought on as guests were answering the questions that the target audience was looking up. So when they looked up the questions, then they got the answers, and then they found the source, and then it brought them to him. And so it was sort of like a dual tone where on one end he was showing expertise and value, and then on the other end he was answering the questions that they were asking and in real time. And so then when they looked up those questions and those answers and they got, they believed already that this was the person that was going to solve their problems before they ever actually reached out.
Okay. So it's kind of like a feedback. Feedback may be not the right word, but it feeds itself in a way. So he's putting out value, asking questions that are valuable to his particular avatar. And they'll then look up things pertaining to their problems that are already connected to him, his business, and the podcast. And thus he's the authority already. They've already listened to him. They already trust him. So they go into his business.
Yeah, another angle that we saw with a client was relationship building with potential partners was the goal. So instead of speaking to the target audience, they were actually bringing the target audience on as guest speakers, getting to know them, talking about their business, talking about, everything relating to them. And then he subtly wove in, what he could do, asked questions from his angle of his business. And so that was another angle that we saw that worked really well.
Okay. What makes a podcast content actually compound for a business versus just fill the feed?
That's a good question. I would say it boils down to 3 things. One is that every episode has to reinforce something that you actually stand for. A good conversation it's table stakes, basically. So reinforcing a point of view is what makes someone remember you next month. 2, I would say every episode has to have a next step that the listener can take besides subscribe. A specific, useful, low friction next step that turns a passive listener into an active relationship, something they can get value from. And then I would say 3 is that every episode has to have a life outside of the podcast feed. So episodes that only exist on Spotify don't compound. Episodes that get clipped into LinkedIn, quotes in newsletters, referenced in conversations, those compound. So that's the kind of repurposing that we like to map out with clients before they hit record, is to make sure that they're getting content that can be used outside of just the entirety of the podcast, that you can clip up and you can put in different ways. You can make it text based for different platforms, just making sure that it has all 3 of these things. So the making sure you have a point of view to reinforce something, low friction next step, and a life outside of the podcast feed is really what does it. One that does none, it's just labor. It's just time that you have to spend.
Okay. So it's having a point that you reinforce, repurposing so that it's not just living on Spotify and Apple Podcast, and having some sort of call to action, small
Mhm.
call to action.
Yes, something other than subscribe.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Have any examples of a small call to action that you've seen that's effective?
Yeah, so like if the podcast is talking about money, it's like a CPA or whatever, a money management person, then you could say, look at your, tax refund and find this from last year and figure out what this value was. Or if you're an organizer and you're giving tips on organizing your home, then you say something like, go open one drawer and clean out one drawer today and make sure each place in that drawer has a home. Like that sort of thing, where you're giving them something they can put into action that has value in their own life. That you're not asking them to go anywhere or do anything, but you're asking them to make change in their own world. Then they remember you. And then when they see that value, then they hit subscribe automatically.
That's interesting because generally, when you said that earlier and I put it into the CTA space, I wasn't thinking of something that's just an action that's
Mhm.
outside of like the business itself. It's just a genuine piece of value that can just be done without being completely connected to like the podcast or the business. It's just something that's valuable to that person that'll help them remember you and the content.
Yeah. And what I would say is you group it into the classic call to actions. So you group it into the classic, like comment, blank, subscribe, like, follow, your spiel at the end. You group the active call to action into like on top of before or either after that. We usually test in the audience to see which one performs better. But sometimes people will comment about that.
Hmm. And the tests have shown which one has better
So
generally.
what we found is after is better. After you do your classic call to action, if you give them that at the end, then they either like or comment or something to remember to do it, or about the value. So they're so used to, the audience is so used to hearing comment, subscribe, follow. They just hear that on repeat daily these days. So if you add it at the end, then you get their attention.
That makes sense. Yeah. Comment, subscribe. Everyone says it. It's just
Yeah.
common thing.
My
Adding that.
my 9-year-old says it. So
Yeah, I believe it. So currently, it seems that you're making a lot of guest appearances. What's your strategy behind that?
that's a good question. So the guest spots have a lot better ROI for where I am right now with Reliable PR and marketing specifically. Hosting a podcast means that I have to build the audience first. Guesting means that I'm borrowing the audience that other people have already built. So there's a pattern that I see with founders and honestly with agencies, where they launch a show because they before they've earned the right to. And they haven't built the point of view, the audience, or the editorial discipline yet. So they're 3 months in, episode 12 with 100 downloads a week, and they're exhausted and trying to find a guest speaker, trying to find a topic, trying to figure out what they're doing wrong. I think guest appearances allow me to sharpen my point of view in real time in front of audiences I don't have to cultivate yet. So every guest spot is sort of like a focus group of what I'd eventually build a show around. When I start hosting, then I'll have a clear point of view, a tested set of conversations, and a roster of people who already know me and reliable PR. And for me, I think that's just a much better way of starting all in, giving it my all from with zero.
Okay. That does make sense. So you're going in, you're borrowing you're borrowing audiences, you're sharpening your points of view so that when you do create a show, it is already coming from a strong standpoint and you feel more confident moving forward around your topic and authority. Is that right?
Yeah, basically. And I'll also sort of know what the people really want to hear, what they are interested in, what doesn't already exist out there. And then also I have the turnaround where if I make it the kind of show that can be applicable across different fields, I already have a group of people who I can invite to guest star.
All right. Solid strategy.
Oh,
So
yeah.
we good now?
Yeah, we should be good now.
Okay, cool. When do you think you actually are going to make your show?
I think I have a few ideas in mind. Some that would be more fun on the personal side, and some that I think would be better for SEO. So right now I'm trying to decide, but I'm thinking in the next 6 months probably.
Okay, fairly soon.
Yeah.
And at what point do you know that you're ready to move from, okay, I've done all this guesting, now the show? Like, what tipped you over to make you think now it's time?
I think it'll be the moment where I'm like, this is a set of questions. This is a set of topics that I keep hoping to be asked, that I keep hoping to be discussed, that haven't been touched on yet, where I can sort of find the gap in the market within myself and sort of know like, okay, no one's really focusing on this. No one's talking about this and I want to, then I'll know exactly which angle I want to go about it.
Okay, so you're looking for that gap. Okay.
Yeah, because it's a full market right now. We do a lot of social work, a lot of PR work, a lot of different things, and there's a lot out there already. So I'm trying to make sure that when I do it and I give it my all, that it's not just the same as somebody else's.
Fair enough.
I have my bachelor's in journalism, and I think the plagiarism aspect still haunts me to this day.
I can't relate, but that does sound stressful.
Yeah.
What do you think is the most powerful way a founder can use their podcast as a business tool and not just a content channel?
Oh, that's a good question. I think what I would say is make your guest list your dream client list is what I would suggest, or your dream partner list or your dream investor list. What I mean by that is a podcast is the best legal excuse on earth to get 45-minute conversations with someone that you'd never get on a sales call. You're not pitching them, you're interviewing them. That changes the entire dynamic from the very beginning. The founders who do this well don't think of the podcast as a marketing channel. They think of it as like a relationship building infrastructure. And every episode is a chance to build a meaningful connection with someone that they want in their orbit. The audience is almost a side effect. And the real ROI is in what happens during the recording and after. So the biggest mistake is treating it like a vanity project focused on downloads, but the smart move is treating it like a CRM with audio attached.
Treating it like a CRM with audio attached. I have not heard that specific way of putting it.
It's a marketing angle for sure.
Yeah.
It pushes every word that I say basically these days is founded from some marketing angle.
I do agree that it puts you in position to have or build relationships with people that otherwise you wouldn't be able to.
Yeah.
In my personal experience, I'm just starting my podcast and I'm already building some relationships that I wouldn't have been able to have any conversation or connection with prior.
Yeah.
Now, personally, I'm not looking at my guest list as potential clients. at the moment, maybe in the future, but maybe that even happens before I realize it. Who knows?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's just if you specifically want to use it as a business tool. There's
Sure.
lots of
Yes.
reasons behind having a podcast. But if it's business focused, then that's what I would say, because a lot of times when it's business focused and that's the goal behind it, founders will focus on views and they'll focus on the ways that they can use it and, the ROI. But you can get a lot bigger of an ROI if you focus on the relationships over the analytics.
Focus on the relationships over the analytics. Is there any benefit at all to focusing on the analytics?
I think definitely. I think analytics are the only insight we have into how well our socials are performing, our initiatives are performing across the board. We'll never fully know because we can't track algorithms, we can't track the insights that they don't tell us about. So the analytics are always important and always valuable. But what you'll notice is you can get caught up in the view count game where you're like, this one got more views, this one got less views. Why was this like this? I don't understand what's going on. How do I get more? And then you just get caught up in vanity metrics. And so use the analytics to test how your performance is doing long term over 15 or 30 days. And then, 60 days, 90 days, like use it as to test how it's compounding. But don't focus on per podcast views. Instead, focus on, engagement, people commenting, saves, shares. All of that has a lot more value behind it.
Looking at it, the analytics for the long term, but not from episode to episode, can be valuable so that you can see the kind of the arc of the show, but it's not the biggest ROI, which is the relationships. Is that right?
Yeah. Yep.
You did say you were planning to potentially launch a podcast in the next 6 months. What specifically, how do I put this? For you, why are you going to make a podcast? How is it going to help you in your business? What would be your strategy?
That's a good question. So, in the marketing industry, when it comes to strategy specifically, there's a few things that you can do to prove that you're a better strategist than whoever they're working with or whoever your competitors are. And one, it's numbers. Numbers don't lie. Great return on investments, great, analytics, great results will always prove that. But the second biggest thing that you have to prove as a strategist is your mind, is your thoughts, is your ideas, your perceptiveness to the industry. And so I think when I start a podcast, one of the angles that I'm thinking of focusing on that would be very beneficial is for thought leadership specifically, to discuss strategies, how they work, why they work, how the industry is changing, how it's developing, how, things like AI popping up are changing everything. Just how the industry basically changes, it feels like every day. But I'd say major changes at least every year or so, sometimes 6 months, but things pop up that change everything very often. And so I think the reason that I would start a podcast to benefit my business would be to get my brain out there, basically. Because right now it can be through LinkedIn posts or reels or things like that, but never a long form. And long form conversations with other people where they ask real questions. I ask real questions, like the conversation side where they can see how my strategic thinking works will prove to business owners, which are my target audience, that it's real. It's not just, a cleverly worded post. It's actually like real strategy behind it.
Okay. So to build your authority and thought leadership in your space so that it's a stronger trust mechanism than just like a LinkedIn post that may have the same thing in it, but like it doesn't have the same impact of a 45-minute conversation.
Yeah, exactly. Because in a podcast you can prep and you can prepare, but you also get random questions, and so you can see that I can come up with the answers on the spot. But that usually only happens in client meetings, which of course can't be recorded and posted.
That would be useful to people though.
Yeah, it would. Yeah. There are some great snippets that I wish, I could just blur my client's face out and post it. So I'm like, dang, that was good. I wish someone heard that.
Okay. I got one more question for you.
Alrighty.
If you were sitting across from a founder whose podcast is going nowhere, you had 1 minute to tell them what to actually fix, what would you say?
Ooh, 1 minute, and I'm long-winded. Um, I would tell them, starting now, if your podcast is going nowhere, you don't have a podcast problem. You just have a strategy problem. What I want you to do is pull up your last 10 episodes and ask yourself 3 questions. One, can you describe the one specific person that this show is for in a sentence without using their industry as a shortcut? 2, what action do you want every listener to take after each episode? And is it actually in the episode? Like, do you tell them? And 3, if a stranger only ever heard the last 3 episodes, would they understand what you stand for and why they should care? And then I would tell them, if you can't answer that clearly, then your podcast isn't broken, your strategy is, basically. The work that's going to make the podcast useful is the same work that you've been avoiding by hiding inside the podcast.
That was very useful. I think a lot of people, even myself, could use that.
There's
Thank
nothing
you,
like a
Lauren.
good audit. Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
There's nothing like a good audit. You can audit anything and everything. And
Oh.
an audit sometimes can hurt your own feelings, but it can tell you a lot about what's happening.
I believe you. Okay. This has been the Founder Podcast Lab. See you in the next episode.